Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Fremberg from the Palm Beach County Office of Resilience. Thank you for joining our panel discussion this afternoon. We're going to start the session off with a message from Palm Beach County Commissioner Mac Bernard, highlighting climate change issues and resiliency efforts in Palm Beach County.
And climate change is so important for the residents of District 7 and pretty much the whole residents of Palm Beach County because as population in Palm Beach County is climbing, but we also have to be mindful of protecting our environment so in that way we can make sure that we live a better county for the future kids and for future generation. The strategic alliances in regards to Monroe County, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County will come together in terms of making sure that we have more of a positive impact to reduce the costs and the burden of climate change. Well, first of all, I want to thank the young folks who are part of this climate summit because it's so important for the young folks to care about our climate, and so in that way they can continue to pass it on to the next generation. So I want to thank them for joining, but at the same time they have to really help us in terms of addressing climate changes. We're having hurricanes that are stronger, and so that's going to impact the future of the state of Florida, and also the affordable housing that we're dealing with. A lot of our young students are not able to afford housing, and how we tackle the housing crisis and also making sure that they have a safe, affordable housing that will be just as important for our young kids. Palm Beach County is so rich in resources. If you're in my district, you can go in Delray Beach and go to the marketplace in Delray Beach, and you can come up north to downtown West Palm Beach. You have the Convention Center, the Kravitz Center, you have the Norton Art Museum, you have the Breakers, Mar-a-Lago. You have so many different places in the county.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard, for your perspective and support. We have a great panel up next for you. Fertile Grounds, Innovations in Climate Smart Agriculture. Climate and agriculture are inextricably linked. In this panel, experts will discuss how climate change is affecting the agricultural industry, including its farm workers. We will also hear about what the industry is doing to help mitigate climate change and land use and urban planning decisions that can help support climate smart agriculture. Our moderator for this panel is Dr. Ron Rice. Dr. Rice is the director of the University of Florida's IFAS Palm Beach County Extension Department. He also provides leaderships to the Mount Botanical Gardens. For more information, please see his bio and the bios of all of our panelists on the event website. Thank you for moderating this session today, Dr. Rice.
All right, great. Thanks, Natalie. We're kind of switching gears here. And so before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to put Florida agriculture into quick perspective for our audience. Florida's got about 47,500 farms. If you look at the landscape, 2/3 of the Florida's land area is under farms and forest production. So that's very significant. The state leads the nation in the production of snap beans, citrus, cucumbers, squashes, watermelons, fresh tomatoes, sugarcane, and fresh sweet corn. Now, since Palm Beach County is hosting our Climate Leadership Summit, you should know that Palm Beach County is the top crop producing county east of the Mississippi River. Ag acreage is about 440,000 acres, which is 35% of Palm Beach County's land area. So again, agriculture is significant. The county leads the nation in sugarcane and fresh sweet corn production, and Palm Beach County leads the rest of Florida counties in peppers, lettuce, rice, sod, radishes, cucumbers, eggplants, and herbs. And typically agriculture is considered the second biggest contributor to the economy after tourism. So we have a diverse range of expertise with us today. And for this reason, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. They represent both the public and private sectors that have an interest and concern regarding potential climate change impacts on our agriculture operations. I'll start with Kelly Smith Burke, the Director of the Office of Energy with Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services. Kelly's been with Florida's Office of Energy since 2008 and is currently the director of this department. She's administered over $176 million worth of federal and state grants that support energy policies, promotes energy efficient technologies, renewable energy, and alternative transportation technologies. Kelly's also worked for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Office of Strategic Projects and Planning as a policy analyst for the governor's action team on energy and climate change. Stephen Basor is with us as well. He's the principal owner of TKM Bengard Farms. The past 21 years, Stephen has served as the director of food safety for TKM Bengard, which is located in Palm Beach County in the Everglades agriculture area. And for added perspective, TKM Bengard is the largest lettuce producing farming operation east of the Mississippi River. In 2011, the American Vegetable Grower magazine recognized TKM Bengard Farms with the Grower of the Year award. That's a national award. 10 years, Stephen's been chair or was chair of the Florida Lettuce Advisory Committee, and he is currently the chair of the Palm Beach County Agricultural Enhancement Council. And he's also on the board of directors for the Wedgeworth Leadership Institute for Ag and Natural Resources. With us today is Dr. Clyde Fracey, a University of Florida professor with the Agriculture and Biological Engineering Department. His extension and applied research programs focus on developing, providing climate information and decision support tools to help farmers better cope with risks associated with climate variability and change. Dr. Fracey's developed and maintains agroclimate.org, which is an interactive web-based tool that uses climate information to improve decision-making with the objective of minimizing crop production risks associated with climate variability and change. And internationally, Dr. Fracey has implemented similar farmer support networks and climate information systems in South America and Africa. With us today is also Dr. Antonio Tovar, policy associate with the National Family Farm Coalition. Dr. Tovar's career describes a focus towards activism and justice. For over 17 years, Dr. Tovar worked at the grassroots organization Farm Worker Association of Florida, ultimately becoming its executive director. He coordinates with the Climate Justice Collective at La Via Campesina, North America, and the South region at the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance. In the labor movement, he was secretary and treasurer of the Food Chain Workers Alliance, and he's a board member with the Florida Immigrant Coalition, as well as the Coalition of Agriculture Workers International. His activism is complemented with his academic work at 4 different universities, writing over 30 publications that address worker health and safety issues. So more detailed bios are on the website for the audience. So for starters, I'd like to call on each panelist to spend just maybe 2 minutes to give a brief summary of how you're connected to agriculture, and perhaps add a few comments how you see your work as relating to preparing agriculture for climate change. And we can start with Kelly.
Sure. Thank you, Ron. And thank you all for having me today. So I'm Kelly Smith Burke, as he said, the director of the Office of Energy. And our Office of Energy within the state of Florida is housed within the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Just for some trivia for you, in case you ever get asked, we are the only Office of Energy within the United States that's located in a Department of Agriculture. So being in the Department of Agriculture, it gives us the ability to work more closely with offices like our Office of Ag Water Policy, in our Division of Forestry, in order to look at how we can work together to mitigate climate change. Where we see our role as the Office of Energy is we've been charged with looking at how we can address issues of energy efficiency, conservation, and renewable energy within the state. So we look a lot at the practices of our ag producers to see how they're using energy and water and how we can be more efficient in that. And I'm sure that we'll talk about that a little bit more. But on the climate resiliency side, one thing that we're also looking at, not just energy efficiency, renewable energy, but how do we add a resiliency component to what agriculture is doing? So for instance, within our aquaculture sector, they depend very heavily on energy and water. And a lot of that is maintaining temperatures as they're trying to grow whatever product they're growing. So when you have something like a storm come through, like Hurricane Irma in 2017, and they're without power for a few days, it really could have a dramatic impact on that industry. So we're looking at how do we provide backup power generation that is more fuel efficient and energy efficient than what is currently or what they might be currently using. So that's kind of our connection to agriculture and how we're working to address climate change.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. How about if we go with Stephen?
Hello. So I am a third generation farmer, and I've been in agriculture my entire life. And basically, we as farmers deal with the climate daily, and we're constantly tracking weather patterns, whether they're existing here in our backyard, or if they're happening on the West Coast, how they might be affecting markets, things of that nature. So it's very important when you're in agriculture to be precise and having to stay 2 steps ahead of changing weather patterns is kind of crucial. So, but my family, we started farming in Michigan originally, and we actually came down to Florida so we could grow year round. So we were growing onions and lettuce during the summer months, and then we would transition to Florida. So basically we could do a year round program. So we do chase the weather patterns.
Thanks, Stephen. And Dr. Tovar, you could weigh in.
Sure. So my family is also farmers in Mexico. I'm one of those generations that actually transition out of the farm, unfortunately, because obviously right now what we need is farmers more than anything else. But in the work that I have been done for many years, what we have seen is that there's a lot of disadvantages. So there's a lot of inequalities regarding climate change. So farm workers, for instance, are at the front of the disasters, usually are more affected when there's a disasters because their housing is in bad conditions. And also they lost work because there is no harvesting, and they don't have any kind of compensation with that when that happened. And the National Family Farm Coalition is an organization of 36 organizations around the country. So it's I moved from the local to a more national perspective. But I would say that both groups are part of La Via Campesina, which is it's a global perspective in terms of how we are going to face climate change or how to address climate change. The Via Campesina, the main proposal is to enact agroecology as a system of production that will deal with climate change, and that will be like. So I know that we are going to talk more in detail, so I'm going to stop there.
All right, and thank you for the perspective that you bring to us, Dr. Tovar. And Dr. Facey?
Yes, thanks, Ron. First of all, thanks for inviting me to contribute to this panel. It's very interesting. Our program, we really look at climate, and like Stephen mentioned, with tracking weather and climate, but with the objective of making a decision. So we always look at, we can track how much it rained, how hot, warm is it today, but how do we translate that into a decision making? And I think that's the main point here, because when we look at different timeframes like weather or the seasonal forecasts or long-term climate changes, the decisions are different, right? So the goal that we have is to look at this and see what sort of decision can you make. Of course, farmers are very interested in tomorrow, in this season, making sure they are in business next year, but climate change is becoming more and more important in a strategic aspect. So what we try to do is to track from the weather today, from the historical time series to the next few days to the next season, and long term. If you give the entire framework, we think we can help them manage the risk better, and that's the focus of our program in terms of climate, weather, and agriculture.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Fracey. Part of our discussion today, and it's in the title, will be climate smart agriculture. And I'd like to call on Kelly. I understand that your Office of Energy has directed personnel and resources into climate smart agriculture. If you could just give us the audience an overview of what's meant by climate smart agriculture, at least from your perspective, and then follow up with how your office is investing in climate smart agriculture.
Certainly. So I'm going to give a very broad definition. I think some of our other panelists might drill down a little bit but I'm going to explain why I'm going to give a broad definition. So from my office's perspective, we look at climate smart agriculture as a holistic approach to moving the ag sector to more climate resilient practices. And I give a broad definition because, as I said, from where we sit in the Office of Energy, we're not really involved in the land management or the livestock management that happens on ag producers' land. What we're looking at is the consumption aspect. So how are you using your energy? How are you using your water? What ways can we look at to conserve that usage, and what ways can we look at it to how you're using it to make it more efficient? So we have developed programs over the last few years they're all modeled the same, but they basically provide an energy audit to the ag producer of their practices, energy and water. After that audit, we provide a report to the ag producer. If they are willing to implement the recommendations that have been given in the report, we will give a cost share up to a certain percentage for them to implement those recommendations. So we're looking at things like energy efficient lighting, fuel and energy efficient motors and pumps, insulation, and building envelope improvements, and in some cases where it makes sense, the inclusion of renewable energy. So we've had a lot of success in these programs. And I want to say too, one of the things that is so important when we're looking at developing a program is having that stakeholder engagement. We spend a lot of time talking to our producers in irrigation, in poultry, in aquaculture, in cattle, and asking them what they needed, what they were looking for, and then we design the program around that. So if you're looking at programs, I think it's very important that you have that interaction and you have those conversations so that you can develop these programs out. We also started too with a small pilot program because we wanted to test it to make sure that it was going to work the way that we wanted it to. And once we got that, once we went through that a little bit, we were able to expand it to a statewide program and then to our aquaculture sector. We're still looking at other sectors where we know these types of programs could be beneficial to them. So stay tuned because hopefully we will have some of those programs coming out shortly. But that's where we were looking at it. And that's why I say holistic, because it's not just looking at how you're using the land, but also how you're using your energy and water, because it has an impact in your practices and in the bottom line. So that's where I think we are a part of that holistic approach in looking at that. We're also looking to, a lot of what we've been seeing in the last couple of years is you're looking at utility scale solar or community solar and how that impacts agricultural land. So we've been working with the city of Tallahassee on a pilot project looking at pollinator plants and how they can coexist with renewable energy systems. And I think that that's also an aspect of climate smart agriculture is how can these two, renewable energy and agriculture, coexist? So we're starting a pilot program with the city of Tallahassee to look at that. But that's where I think we fit in, and that's the definition that we use for climate smart agriculture. But I'm sure some of our panelists may drill down a little bit more into it based upon what their role in climate smart agriculture is.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. So, Dr. Tovar, I was wondering if you had a different perspective on climate smart agriculture that you might share with us.
Sure, we do. You know, something that we recognize, like many of the good things that climate smart agriculture brings into the table, but we consider that it's an euphemism that doesn't really capture what it's addressing climate change in the agriculture sector, because agriculture definitely is a contributor to carbon print, but it's also can be a solution for climate change. So, and the other aspect of climate smart agriculture that for this is more personal, but I think that saying climate smart agriculture means that probably the farmers were not very smart before about doing this work, and that's not the reality. No, the agriculture has been always the bare bone of our existence. We eat every day, so farming is definitely important and smart. No anybody. It is a very skilled and difficult work. So that's saying. Besides that, I think that there's a lot of important contributions from the climate smart agriculture, like Kelly was defining, like being more resourceful, like being more conscious about the resources that are being used for the production. But our model on agroecology has it's a more older concept that required to have a less input on other resources, not just energy, but also in terms of the input of fertilizers and pesticides. So, and the climate smart agriculture it's a concept that comes like in 2010, and now the Food and Agricultural Organization is using it also in the UN Food System Summit that was at the start of this year, and I think that it kind of serve the purpose of intensify industrial agriculture, and that's something that is problematic from our point of view, because as I say, we represent a lot of small family farms that in some respect might not be able to compete with some of the larger producers.
Okay, thank you very much. Any of our other panelists want to weigh in on climate smart agriculture?
Yeah, of course, I'll be happy to talk a little bit about this. I think that smart means making the right decision, and I appreciate what Antonio was saying about we talk about technology sometimes, and there's a lot of data coming from different sources, from sensors, and you can perhaps do a better job by utilizing this data better in terms of becoming more resilient, more prepared, using forecasts, etc. But also brings the question of, can a small farmer have this technology available to them as well? So I think that there is a need to be concerned about this and be sensitive about it. But at the same time, I think that we have tremendous opportunities nowadays to bring new ideas in terms of becoming more resource use efficient, which will end up becoming decreasing your carbon footprint and helping mitigate climate change as well. So I think that we need to be aware, but we need to bring all this new technology that it is available nowadays. And what really makes it more interesting is because we can communicate this fast now. So before, you could have a weather station and you track by hand the records, and you transfer this somewhere else. Nowadays, we have that in a mobile phone at the same, in almost near real time. So how do we conciliate those things is important, but opportunities are tremendous to become more efficient, I think.
Thank Dr. Tracy. Stephen.
Sure. Well, as you know, as Dr. Frazee was just saying, as technology is continuing to advance and at the rapid rate that it is, I can just tell you, our personal operation from 1 year to the next is completely different. We're always, innovating, applying, new technology, and we've always been, as farmers, I would say that we're typically innovators. If we were not, we would no longer be farmers. It's a definitely challenging industry, but any way that we can work better to become more efficient, to be to save on energy, to be more environmentally conscious, we definitely work towards that. Some of the problems with all this new technology and all this new data is just being able to capture it and apply it. It seems like there's endless amounts of information out there, but it's just learning, how do you take this data and how do you use it? But there's certainly not creating any more farmland, and farmers are doing more with less, each year. So it's definitely going to be, technology is something that we're going to have to continue to embrace to continue to stay afloat.
All right. Well, since I've got you on the hook now, let's dive right into it, because you mentioned that as farmers, you need to be innovators. Otherwise, you wouldn't be farming. And you have done a lot of adaptations and modifications, and you evolve over time. So getting back to climate change specifically, in your opinion, in your observations, how has this climate change impacted your farming operation?
Well, agriculture is very seasonal. So typically you don't have one commodity in one region that grows year round. It moves throughout the country, or even throughout the world, where certain times of the year you can only have access to certain commodities. And I think there's a lot of young people that don't understand, it used to be a time when you would go to the grocery store and you could only purchase what was local and in season. And now, people have been able to find ways to grow things in abnormal production periods and be able to get it from other parts of the country and the world and distribute it in. So it's kind of amazing that you can find all these commodities year round. But as far as the production goes, we're still very much tied to what's conducive, and so what we're seeing here is definitely a trend where it's staying warmer longer. Hurricanes are a concern. There's really nothing we can do agriculturally against a hurricane. So other than just try not to grow during those periods. But I think our production window is shortening, where typically we would begin planting in early September and be harvesting mid-November. The last few years that we've seen, it's just stayed warmer in the fall, and our quality has not been optimum. And so it's just been really a percentage decision that we want to stay in our safe production window. So we actually shaved 2 weeks off of our growing season and planted 2 weeks later this season, just because things seem to be staying warmer longer. Same thing at the tail end. We're kind of trimming up the back end because of the rains and the heat. So we can only be really producing you know, in this perfect time where the temperatures are mild and the weather, you know, tends to be on the drier side where we're not typically getting our summer rains. So our production window is basically end of November, and then we go through to mid to end of April. And so that's the biggest way that's affecting us right now is we're just having to shorten our season.
All right, thank you. You know, something came to mind. This isn't obviously just happening in Florida. So I know a lot of some farmers in South Florida, you know, have farming operations or interests in other states as we move northward. And I suspect maybe these changes to the crop production season or the optimal season have been changing there as well. Have you noticed that at all, or has that influenced the movement of your production or South Florida production up northward during the winter season for sales?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting how one thing you know affects your business on something that happens on the other side of the country. But we're certainly seeing northern production. So we no longer grow during the summer months, but typically we would be finishing our production in Michigan first week of October, and now people with hardier crops, say like cabbage or cauliflower, broccoli, things like that, are going into October and November, or late October, early November. So because things are staying longer in the Northeast, where it would typically be, you know, getting cooler faster, now they're able to actually extend their production season. So yeah, a lot of different changes happening all over the board, depending on what region you're growing in.
All right. Thank you for that, Stephen. I'd like to bring Dr. Fracey back. I mean, from your perspective, with your university research programs, how do you see the potential impacts to Florida's agriculture?
Yeah, we have notes, you know, in some of the decision tools we have. I'll give you an example, chule accumulation. I mean, we have had warmer winters. 2016, for instance, was a very warm winter. And if we look at the last 20 years or so, the accumulation of chule hours, which are important for temperate fruit like blueberries or peaches, we have seen a decrease in the accumulation. In fact, we have a project now. We inform some farmers about their accumulation because that's what they use to guide their application of rest-breaking agents like Dormex, etc., which are fairly important. So I have seen this an increase in interest and anything related to extreme climate events. I think it's where we see picking up in terms of interest. I see, and there was a good example, not in Florida, but in the Pacific Northwest this year. We saw the extreme heat that they had there affecting labor. And I think this will be an issue over here as well. I mean, we have to be aware that we may need to track that it was a harvest time over there for, I believe, for blueberries or cherries, in fact, and they had to start working. I talked to a friend over there. They start working at 3 o'clock in the morning and stop at 9 to avoid the heat. So on the other hand, we have seen the hurricanes becoming coming more often, and there are two types. I mean, if we look at Michael in 2018, it was a very windy, strong Cat 5 hurricane, tremendous problems. Last year, we had another Sally in September of 2020, which was a very slow Cat 2, but extremely slow. In our, I had a student working in Jay, which is close to Pensacola. They had 25 inches of rain in one day, 24 hours. And that brings a lot of questions. How do we become more resilient? Certainly we have to look at this very carefully.
Okay, thank you. You did bring up a topic here, and I think I'd like to go back to Dr. Tovar, because this has been a concern with all 4 of the counties that are part of this compact. But you know, extreme heat is very dangerous, and prior panels have talked about, the concrete urban environment, the occurrence of urban heat islands, the need to increase urban tree canopies for their cooling effects, installation of green spaces for parks and natural areas to let people escape heat. But meanwhile, Florida agriculture, and basically most of America's agriculture, relies on a largely transient labor force, and they work long days in the field. They have, transient type housing or temporary housing that may not be up for the heat that is occurring, that's increasing. So for Dr. Tabar, what concerns do you have regarding our agriculture labor force with respect to increasing temperatures?
One of the studies that I have the opportunity to participate was to monitor the heat stress level of farm workers for several years. That was with Emory University, University of Florida, Florida State University. We have been working on monitoring these effects, and obviously there is a short and on long-term effect of heat stress on labor. One of our main issues, or the main issues among the agricultural system, is the piece rate, which is how much you are paid for how much you are harvesting, which for us is one of the riskiest part of the war, because it pushed the workers to work harder, to take this less rest, and to really keep hydrated. Now, obviously, there is an increase on the levels of heat, not just in Florida, but in the nation, and that will increase the risks. There is some attempts to also use technology in terms of monitoring the hydration level of workers while they are in the field. But obviously, again, it's an issue also of equality, because the investment for this kind of technology is high. So, and it's not a fault of the producers. Farmers, for the most part, they have a small margin of income or they win when they are going to process their food. The cost of production is increasing, and sometimes the way in which they are paid, it's not also fair in many cases. But definitely workers are at risks. There is more cases of heat exhaustion for workers. And also in the long term, there's a lot of kidney disease associated with heat stress.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in on the human aspect of agriculture rather than the biology of agriculture? It's something that we do want to keep track of because we talk a lot about the technologies for plant breeding, and we'll get a little bit into that, I think, but this is a good topic to keep in mind. Yes, Stephen.
So, we talked about it, a little bit that when you're having these disruptions or the weather events, the farm workers tend to pay, the hardest, and that's very true. If we have some sort of rain event that wipes us out, for months at that time, there's really nothing that we can do. We can't afford to pay when we're not producing. We're already losing. So the biggest thing that we're looking for in agriculture all the time is uniformity, stability, consistency of quality of production, and climate change is definitely something that disrupts that and does make it very hard on the workforce. So that's another reason why we shorten our season. We want to be able to be in the months when we're going to be most dependable. And then that's also going to ensure that our labor, our workforce is able to come out, daily and be able to make the money that they need, to support their families. So If we have too many disruptions, then our industry or our business will be too, viewed as too risky, and then that labor will have to go someplace else, and that's going to, definitely hurt the farmers, and it's also going to hurt the small businesses that depend on the labor, that comes in and works in agriculture. So it's definitely a tight little ecosystem that we have there with the labor and the communities, and then the support for the businesses, and also for the taxes that support the county. So definitely important that we try to be as stable of an industry as possible.
All right, thanks, Stephen. I'd like to ask Kelly a question, if you don't mind. It's kind of segueing on Stephen's comments, but so Kelly, Stephen had mentioned, looking for uniformity, consistency, reliability of farming operations, reducing risks, and these are disrupted by climate events. How does your office work with your stakeholders, as you mentioned, to get involved in programs that might help reduce some of those risks and be more consistent and reliable and predictable?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do, like I said, is that stakeholder engagement. So we go out and we like to meet people where they're at on their farms, on their production lands, to see what their practices are and where we could possibly help. And so a lot of time when we were first developing our first pilot program in this area to reduce energy and water efficiency in ag production, we spent, I would say, probably about 2 years having conversations with not only ag producers, but our Farm Bureau, the soil and conservation districts within the state, to get a real idea of what was needed. And I say that we took that much time because the Office of Energy had joined the Department of Agriculture in 2011. So we were not familiar with a lot of the agriculture practices. So we had to get up to speed on that. We had to understand growing seasons. We had to understand when it would make sense for us to do these programs, when it would make sense for us to run them, how to schedule them to make sure that we could meet the demand of who was coming into the program. So of time to get to where we were, but I think once we had that first pilot program, it really went off very well because we took that time. And I think oftentimes we want to rush into something, but really if we just take a step back and have those conversations and work out what some of the issues may be, or understand them more, then you can create, I think, a program that can really be beneficial to this sector. And so we looked at things like you said, resiliency. I think that's a big issue. So we've been looking at how do we connect our ag producers with generators that are more fuel and energy efficient? How does that factor into their practices? Can they also use solar energy? For instance, we had a poultry farmer who put some solar panels on his poultry house, and that had an impact too. So it's kind of like, I think what Stephen said about looking at technologies, and I think in some aspects you have to kind of step a little bit out of the box of what you would normally think would be in an ag sector or in a production for agriculture, and see where you can make some different connections that maybe you hadn't done before. But again, it all goes back to communication. And so I think that's really the biggest aspect and the key that has helped us have programs within our ag sector that have been so successful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that insight, Kelly. I go real quick so I don't forget, back to Dr. Tovar, if you don't mind. Just because we're talking about government agencies at this point and their missions. In the face of climate change impacts and protecting our ag workers, what combination of agencies do you think need to work together to find good solutions?
Well, Right now, the Occupational Health and Safety Agency, the OSHA, is the one who has some recommendations in terms of preventing heat stress. These are just recommendations. It doesn't mean that they are mandatory. I think that it is getting time because contrary to other growers like Steven, I actually saw the video on their website, and they have a machinery that they help the workers not to be carrying an enormous amount of weight when they are working. So I agree that there's technology that can help also workers to make their work less severe. But I think that is also the need for some regulations that actually address rest, hydration, and also more time for the work that they do. Now, obviously, that has a cost for producers, and I know that that's something that is challenging for some of them. But I think that workers might be able to produce the same amount with a little bit more rest. Hydration is something that is very challenging, especially when we're talking about food safety, and Steve is an expert on food safety, because there is also some regulations in terms of not having water on the fields, for instance. So having waters in one single place, and sometimes for workers, it's hard to hydrate that way.
Yeah, good point. Okay, thank you, sir. Might jump back into the biology, I suppose, of agriculture and climate change. So, Dr. Freise, I got a question for you. In your experience, what do you think? How can farmers best adapt to climate change that's predicted in our future?
Yeah, that's a very broad question.
It's very broad. We'll drill in any way you want to.
Okay. Well, let me just, if you don't mind, just go back 1 second about this idea of the heat index. And I think OSHA has a very interesting app that monitors and forecasts in near real time the heat index in any place in the country. So this is something that it's simple to use and can certainly help. I just want to make that point. But back to adapting, I think that when I have to say a few years ago, 10 years ago, maybe or more, talking about climate change was kind of hard. And I always think that we have to address it by bringing it to the current situation. And the best way I see that is to talk about extreme events. So, I mean, I think that the right way is to not to adapt, but how do I become more resilient? Because adaptation almost requires you to know exactly what's going to happen. And I think that we are not sure about everything. So becoming more resilient is very important. And then there are different, let's say, clients for this information. I would say when we look at the long-term climate projections that have some not so high confidence in their projections, I don't see a farmer making a decision based on that. But a plant breeder, we can look at different aspects, and some of them, in my opinion, are overlooked. One of the more successful decision tools we have in our system is a disease model that just tells them to apply or not fungicides, strawberries, blueberries, for 2 diseases, anthracnose and botrytis. I think that one way to look at some of those diseases may become less or more prevalent with the climate patterns that we expect in the future. So start looking, most of the papers I see, they target crop yield, crop production, but I think we can start looking at crop management aspects in a better way and start becoming more prepared for those shifts. And at the same time, becoming more resilient. And some of the ideas sometimes are very simple. Just not place your pumping station in the low parts of the field that's going to be flooded. There is a hurricane is one simple idea that you pay attention to don't install it in the very low areas, but trying to get to areas that have a better chance of not being flooded. So there are many ideas, simple ideas that we can collect and discuss and broadcast that would help with this adaptation. And then you have a more long-term ideas like plant breeding. What should we prepare in terms of heat stress, water stress, disease? Those things we should be looking at as well.
Thanks. And you did mention plant breeding. I had something on my mind. So there's a lot of expectations on our plant breeders with respect to climate change and building tools that can be useful. But this takes time to develop plants through traditional breeding techniques. Is there enough time? Would be a question that a lot of people ask. And I just wonder, how optimistic are our plant breeders right now with their role in producing new cultivars and varieties that will be more resilient?
It's an open question. I think that some are. I think I am optimistic about that. I think we are moving in that direction. There's lots of. I think there was a blueberry new variety that was released by University of Florida recently that has a very low chill requirement. Back to the chill accumulation issues, there are many plant breeders looking at drought-resistant varieties for different crops, which we know. Of course, most of our fruits and vegetables are irrigated here in Florida, but we are in a very sandy soil situation. So any 10 days without rain could be catastrophic if you don't have an irrigation system. But also, that's what I think that's is part of the climate smart is we look at a lot on the phenology of a plant, or how does it develop, because any stress, either heat stress, cold stress, or water stress, it matters when it happens. If it's flowering and we have a high temperature, then it's a problem. But if it's not flowering, maybe it's not going to be such a severe problem. So I think we need to get our minds together. And I really like when the idea of bringing the stakeholders, because we can't tackle this by ourselves. I mean, we need to work together in terms of climate change for ag, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. And then back to stakeholders and previous comments by Kelly. From your state office, Kelly, what barriers or challenges, or let's even call them opportunities if we want to reverse it, have you experienced in your Office of Energy programs as you've been trying to develop these?
I think one of the barriers, especially the last couple of years, has been, of course, the pandemic and us not being able to go out and to have these conversations. I think one of the barriers too prior to that was, I think for a long time, a lot of our sectors were siloed, and, agriculture was agriculture, energy was energy, and breaking down those silos, I think, has been very important. But I think when we were first starting this conversation, it was, explaining how the Office of Energy, like I did before, could be involved and should be involved in the ag sector, because I think that there was, this thought that, well, if you're doing energy efficiency or renewable energy or even alternative forms of transportation, that's separate than what we're doing in ag. And so I think that not just in the ag sector, but in a lot of sectors, we've had so many silos that have been built. But as Clyde said, if we're going to tackle this problem, we really need to start having conversations with everyone who has a whole hand or even a thumbprint within this sector, so that we can look at how all of these things relate to each other and how all of these things depend upon each other, because we all are interconnected. And so I think having those original conversations and explaining, and having people understand where the cross sections were, where we were interdependent on each other. I think it was always there. It was just sometimes you need someone to really point it out to you. But I think from here on out, it's really making sure that you have everyone who needs to have a seat at the table so that we can have this conversation, so we can look at how we can share resources, how we can share information, how we can share research and development. From my office and the Office of Energy, we're always looking for how can we help support. If it's in the R&D sector, where can we help that? If it's in the actual implementation sector, where can we help that? So I think it's just really having hard conversations about where we are and where we need to go, and just making sure again that we're having the right people at the table to have these conversations, and not just the typical people that you would think, but looking outside of our box and our silo to really include everyone who has a part to play in this.
Thank you, Kelly. And it's just dawned on me that our time is running out. And I wish we had 2 hours, because I feel like we're just starting to get rolling here. This has been amazing. And we do have some questions from our audience. And I think I got time to pull just one. Unless anybody on our panel has a final thought that you really wanted to make a point, this would be your chance.
Very quick, I think that the issue of breeding new plants, I think that it is clear that the COVID-19 really show how weak our system is in terms of food distribution, and I think that we need more diversity in terms of the production that we have in our system. But you can go ahead with the question.
Thank you, Dr. Tovar. This one was directed to Stephen Basor, but I think it really can be directed to all of us because it's something we all think about. So just as extreme heat stresses the human body, do you notice any issues with respect to pollinators being stressed by the heat? Our bees and our other pollinators that.
So that's a good question. Yeah, bees are absolutely essential. With lettuce production, the lettuce seed is actually not pollinated and grown here locally. It's actually done in a very arid, dry region, and that's where the pollinators are. And then they take the seeds and they pack them and ship them to us. So we're not doing actual seed production here, but one thing that does tie in a little bit is we talked about the blueberries and how they're, University of Florida and different people are coming out with these low chill varieties that are able to grow into different non-traditional regions that stay warmer. And actually, I'm doing a little bit of that. I've been growing berries now for about 5 years here in South Florida. With some low chill varieties, and we do use pollinators there. So we have to bring in honeybees, we bring in bumblebees, and yes, I mean it's very, very important that there's so many different things that can affect. I'm not an expert on bees, but I can tell you that they are absolutely essential for any sort of fruit and vegetable production. So yeah, without bees, we're not going to have anything to eat. And when we do start dealing with climate change, it's a domino effect. It doesn't just affect one sector. It's going to affect the wildlife. It's going to affect the aquatic life. It's going to definitely change everything. So it's very important that climate change is slowed or reduced as much as possible, so we can protect the environment the way that it exists today.
Stephen, I think that was a perfect closing statement for this entire panel. I appreciate that. Natalie, I see you on board, so I think our time is about up. Shall I hand it back to you?
Yep. Thank you all so much. It's so inspiring to hear about all the innovations that are being done in the agricultural field to address climate change concerns. Thank you to all of our panelists and to Dr. Ron Rice for moderating the discussion. Our next and final session of the day is the keynote address by Crystal Bergman, the Senior Advisor of Climate for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We'll also have an announcement from our Broward County Commissioner Furr about next year's Climate Leadership Summit and closing remarks from our Palm Beach County Administrator, Virginia Baker. To join this session, please return to the CVent portal and click on the next session link. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, so much. Much appreciated. It's been fun. It's great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Ron.
much.